Just a few days ago, somebody used a blue Tapcon screw like I'm holding here for body weight only, but it came out on them, they fell, and they broke their shoulder. I've been meaning to make this video for a while, and I should have made it about 2 weeks ago. And you'd probably be wondering, why is anybody using 1/4-inch screws for anchors in rock? Normally, the minimum that people are using for permanent anchors is like 3/8 inch or 10mm bolts, and typically 2 of them. So why are people actually doing this? Well, there's a couple reasons you would want a small hole and a small bolt, typically for exploration. So these require a smaller hole, so they're easier to drill a smaller hole. Concrete screws specifically are very easy to remove, as opposed to a wedge bolt, a 5-piece bolt, or a glue-in. Once they're in, they can be removed, but it's a pain in the butt. Instead of reaching up high and trying to hammer in a wedge bolt, you can just take a drill with a magnetic nut driver and go, and hang on, and use one hand. And they're cheap. That's probably also why. Now you can see in the Instagram post that I asked people about this, you can see there are climbers in there are cavers in there, and the person who bought me a box of 100 of these to test is a canyoneer in Costa Rica who uses these in exploration. Now we're gonna pull test these things in the wild, and we're going to pull test them also in the lab to isolate the variables we got in the rock. But is it safe-ish? If it's only for body weight, and it's only temporary, then is it okay? If you are 225 pounds with gear, and you're hanging on the rope, you're putting only 1 kilonewton of force on it, and if you rappel on it, and you're not smooth about it, you might get up to 2 kilonewtons. The problem is if you fall on it. But why did this one come out if that's all that the guy was doing? Now, I do love the comment, don't publicly promote the use of these. I'm not promoting using these. People use them, and I want to know how strong it is because literally somebody got hurt because we don't know this information. Now, what I have here in my hand is a plated steel, and this is blue steel, and these would eventually rust if they were to be left outside forever. Please use stainless if you are leaving permanent hardware up for other people to trust their life to. We want the hardware to last longer than the people installing it, so our rocks don't look like Swiss cheese when we're all headed to Mars. And if I love stainless so much, why do I have a plated steel bolt that we now carry at hownottoo.com? Well, it's because it's temporary. We also technically have plated steel for the 3/8 and the 1/2 inch version as well, because those are also used for different types of exploration, but that's not what this video is about. Now let me show you something that I didn't know before I started researching for this video. These are both called 1/4-inch screws. Can you see a problem with that? If you measure the shank on this one, it is 6mm. And if you measure the outside diameter of the threads, it is 9mm. If you measure the shank of this, it is only 4.8mm. But what's scary is if you measure the outside threads, it's 6.7mm, which means this could go in a 6mm hole and feel secure-ish. Let's say you're not crazy and use a 1/4-inch drill bit, which would barely make that work, but you use the one that this comes with. This drill bit shank is 4.2mm, which is not the 6mm you think you're getting. I think we solved why this came out. If you're gonna use a 1/4-inch screw, make sure you're using a real 1/4-inch screw. Now we have some cool hanger options, and there are some things you need to know before you go order a hanger for this. But you don't wanna mix plated steel with stainless steel permanently, because bimetallic corrosion will have the stainless steel corrode the plated steel much quicker. And that's what you see when you see the bolt. This looks really rusty, but somehow the hanger doesn't, or the hanger looks really rusty and the bolt looks fine. That's what's going on. But you can see that they're mixed right now and not blowing up in my hand. So if you're just using this stuff for temporary anchors, which is all this is probably maybe good for, then sure, do that. I don't have plated steel hangers because I don't want people to use them and buy them, because people cheap out on stuff like that, and that's why we have to replace so many things out in the wild. Imagine if developers could just develop instead of rebolt a bunch of things. Half the bolting funds could go to actually making progress. By the way, we've never seen any issues mixing 304 and 316 stainless steel, as long as you're in an area that 304 stainless steel is okay to use, aka very far away from the ocean. Now you have quite a few options for hangers, but what's interesting about the hangers that have 8mm holes is that they're about 8.5mm. So you can get a 9mm thread in here, but it has to work itself in, and you want to put that on before you start screwing. Now this Alpine hanger is 3mm. That's a 4mm standard hanger, and this is our thick 6mm hangers. And so this Alpine one makes the most sense for a screw that's probably not going to hold that much strength. And this is our cheapest hanger with an 8mm hole at $2.75. So this is probably most likely what people would be using. You can get an ultralight hanger with a super heavy ring attached to it if you really want to have a place to put your rope through it. But there are some other cool options that eliminate the ring, and there's some 316, which you don't need if this is temporary. So the 304 does have an 8mm hole for the SUL hangers right there. And you can thread your rope directly into that. And that is a pretty sweet setup. For the same price and almost half the weight, you can get these rings from Teflon. And they do fit because it's an 8mm hole. And that is an ultralight ring. And it's called an ultralight ring. Now this could work well if you're pulling straight down, but what happens if you're in a ceiling and you want to pull this way? It's not great for that, and that's where this guy comes in. Now these both weigh the same, and this is a little bit more money, but if you're only using it for temporary use, you don't need that many of them. And this ring hanger is awesome. You need an extension for your hex head, but you can get that straight in there like that. It's offset, as you can see, and if that was in a ceiling, you could pull straight down on that, and that is going to give you full strength of whatever this gives you in whatever rock you put it in. The 1/4 inch fits on the 8mm holes, but I want to make sure you guys know that this 3/8 will fit on a 3/8 hole because this is designed for also 10 mil as well. And so if you spin this, you can get it on the hanger, and you can see how well that fits in there right there. You don't want to hang on to this and start drilling like this, because if that bites and grabs that hanger, this thing is going to start spinning and you could potentially really hurt your fingers. We recommend just using a 1/2 inch hole because that flange fits really well right there. And that is the amount of space behind there. And the amount of force you're putting on there is not going to be pulling that through. The problem with 1/2 inch is this is good for 12 mil and 1/2 inch, 12.7 mil. This is more than 12.7, and so it cannot go on there without upsizing the hole. And so eventually we'll get some hangers that are like this that are bigger, which can accommodate this. But just know that if you get a 1/2 inch concrete screw, you're not getting in a 1/2 inch hanger without upsizing that hole. Now let's say you like the placement of your bolt. You can upsize the hole to 3/8 or 1/2 inch if you need to. And you can put in a wedge bolt, another concrete screw, or a glue in. So you have a lot of options to do something with that hole if you deem it to be worth it. If you don't like where that placement is, it's a lot easier to patch than if you have a big hole there. Now, a crazy fact I don't think most people realize is this isn't what holds you. It's not this part that holds you. It's the rock that holds you, and this has to be in the rock super good enough. So let's go test this in some real rock. We used to have to set up an entire piston in order to break bolts, but now we can put the Z2 on the end of an 18-to-1 and get enough force to test these bolts. Since we have friction in the system, 0.9 is not exactly half of 2, and I would love to not have this here in the system and just have that in the system. Stop. That's 3.1. What do you got over here?
1.37.
So not quite half. Stop. 4.2. Yeah, I mean, it's not quite half. What are we testing there?
These are the 1/4 inch version. So we've used a ton of the 3/8. The rating on their spec sheet is less than 20 kilonewtons. The standard for bolts for climbing is 25, 20 in this orientation that we're testing now. This rock, not super great, but these do have a lot of engagement along the whole length of the bolt. So we'll see.
So if we're measuring on this back half of the 2-to-1,
having it over there allows us to put less force on the sensitive equipment and less likely for the sensitive equipment to go flying and hit something. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
wow!
So
It just peeled.
yeah, so it peeled the flange off.
22.4 plus some. I would call that a 23.
Yeah, all day.
We're within a kilonewton of accurate when we're playing with forces like this in the wild. I feel way safer having the line scale back there.
Yeah, absolutely.
How's the Z2 thing feeling? Is it just
wasn't struggling at all to get to that force.
wow? Yeah. I mean, granted, it's
on an 18 to 1.
Yeah,
that is a very surprising result to me. I want to.
You want to do it again?
Repeat it, yeah.
Okay. It's just really wild to stand next to this while that's happening. That's really awesome.
We got a slightly smaller result. This is more in line with what it's rated to. Interesting that it's not the bolt engagement with the rock that's failing. It's something on the top that you might be able to fix with a washer.
Look what a 1/4 inch bolt looks like in a 3/8 inch hole. We didn't have access to 8mm holes when we went out and tested this, and I'm surprised that it just held so much. So now let's pull this same thing in shear to see how much strength we get from the neck of it. Where'd the bolt go? Oh shit!
We put the bolts too close to the edge. 7.19 on this side, so
maybe 15.
Maybe 15.
Wow. Yeah, we peeled that away.
Yeah.
It wasn't that close to the edge.
It wasn't that close. In good rock, it wouldn't have made a difference, but this rock is not amazing.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah. If you look closely here, you can see the ancient threadabites left behind by concrete screws.
Oh, it snapped off.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing, though, is if the rock gives away here, it's going to flex a lot more than it likes to flex. So about 15.
Yeah, more than 15. So as a permanent bolt, I don't think these are acceptable. But if you're thinking about, say, route development or a temporary bolt, this opposed to a cam to rappel down on, a couple of these is going to be a lot stronger even in this not very great rock than like a nest of cams.
Super consistent enough. Now, I shared the results you just saw with somebody before I made this video, and they said, oh wow, does that mean we could potentially use 1/4 inch or 6mm wedge bolts? Or what about 6mm Petzl pulses? No! No! That is the problem with this, is it's called a 1/4 inch, but it's not a 1/4 inch. A wedge bolt, if you drilled a 1/4 inch hole for it, the actual shank, the bolt itself would have to be like 4.5 millimeters, because the wedge and where it comes out in the bottom can only be 6 millimeters. Or a Petzl pulse is you have a tiny little shank inside of the sleeves that you expand with when you push the pulse button. So please, I mean, maybe don't even use these, but if you are gonna go with 1/4 inch to trust your life to it, make sure you understand that there's a lot more metal on this thing than there is on all other bolt options, including other screw options. We should test this here in the lab to eliminate the variable in rock. So I have an idea. I have this bolt fixture in order to be able to pull things in shear, and I have these little adapters that can go inside of here. And what I could do is take this and I could glue that in there with a hanger, and that's perfect rock. It's not going to move. And then we can find out when the neck shears off, assuming that this is going to hold 100%. And I also have this fixture that we can test in tension now that I have a hanger with an 8mm hole, so the hanger or the bolt should break before the hanger peels off the bolt. And for fun, we can also test a 3/8 screw and just compare if the results we get with this match the dozens of tests that we've done in real rock, which we have an entire video showing you that. Now this 1/2 inch bolt does not fit in here, and I honestly think it's gonna break over 100 or 120 kilonewtons, and I don't really wanna do that to my machine right now. But we can test if this held, if this little guy held the full strength in the rock and the neck snapped off. It looks so silly in there. We can brake test that as well. Here are my 4 samples. This is the Alpine hanger on the long 1/4 inch screw here, and that is the direction the shear test will be pulling. This is the 3/8 screw and the big fat hanger. Look how tiny that Tapcon screw looks inside of there. But we'll be testing this hanger with it, and we'll test that 1/4 inch screw with the hanger best in tension, since we'll be pulling in tension. So the glue I'm going to be using is the EP800 pure epoxy, because it is the best stuff we've got. AC100 is going to be a better glue if it's colder out, but because I'm in room temperature, I can use this stuff. I don't want it coming out the bottom, so I'm going to do that for now, and this one doesn't matter which direction it's orientated. I'm going to let these things cure for about 12 hours, and then we will pull test them. They're ready. Oh, that's not a fair test. The hanger is glued to the top of the adapter. There is something fascinating about stainless steel. Is ironically, it doesn't stick to epoxy very well, which is why all the glue-ins that you see have a shape or a thread or a notch, so the glue has something to grab onto. The stainless just sitting on top of that adapter is going to pop without any problem. So let's start pulling on these. Let's start with the little guy. Oh, that didn't take much. That's not very strong. Yep, it sheared off. There's the top half. And 9K in is when that hanger flattens out. 23. Wow, that just sheared it off so clean. Where's the head? This 3mm hanger did all right. It's a different shape, but it's still in the game. That is such a perfect number. We're gonna have to pull this one in tension right now. We can't pull out this fat one yet because that bigger piston's down there. This is gonna get pulled in tension with our 2-to-1 being pulled with our hydraulic, which gives us plenty of force for this guy here. 32? Rarely do I see tension being stronger than shear. And you can see where it broke off at one of the threads down inside of there. This hanger still has some life in it, and this bolt does not. It's 10,450 pounds in English, or in metric, I should say. So there's the head snapped off. This hanger is a little flatter than it used to be, but you can see that the glue kind of shears off. That is a nice clean break. You know the science is good when we capture all 4 slow-mos. Now, a 4-cutter drill bit will give you a rounder hole, which will give you a better engagement in the rock, which clearly is what we care about the most with these, because the shaft itself is super strong enough, both in shear and tension for body weight, as long as it stays in the rock. Now this is 3.5 inches. We also have 2 other sizes in case you're feeling extra spicy, or your rock is extra good, I should say. Now the equivalent of these in Europe would be the multi-mont screws, which cavers have been using for a while, so nothing new there, but same concept. Now I'll make another video talking about why 1/2-inch screws would be used in exploration. The short story... Jesus. This one is too big to be dropping on my foot. The idea behind these is that the hole is already big and you can just stick your glue in. Now Titan HDs don't come in 8mm or 5/16, but I can maybe find a different screw if some people really want those, or I can get the multi-monts. But we did do a bunch of tests on the 3/8 Titan bolts, and you can go see that video next. We really thought that screw was gonna come out.